Good afternoon. Today's Battle Rhythm Advocating for Women Warriors will be hosted by Jeanette Gillis. Jeanette is the Deputy Director of Community Integration at America's Warrior Partnership. She is also the lead for America's Warrior Partnerships Network, which provides local veterans serving organizations with a connection to national resources when veterans' requests cannot be met locally. To find out more about the network, please visit americaswarriorpartnership.org/the network. That's it for me, Jeanette. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome all of our affiliate communities, 4-Star Alliance members, veteran service organizations, as well as any guests that are with us this afternoon. I think you're in for a treat, and we're excited to have you here. Our agenda for today is going to be Meghan Jackson is our first speaker. She's our subject matter expert. Meghan is a government affairs specialist with the Wounded Warrior Project. We'll also have a section with questions and answers. We'll then have our collaboration section, which will be our breakout rooms, and you've been already introduced to some of our breakout speakers. Let me tell you a little bit about Meghan Jackson. She currently serves as the Wounded Warrior Project's Government Affairs Specialist, and she's located in Washington, D.C. In her role, Meghan leads advocacy efforts related to one of WWP's top legislative priorities, which is women veterans, and supports a variety of issues, including healthcare and military personnel. Prior to joining the Wounded Warrior Project in 2019, Meghan worked as a government relations consultant in the defense industry, and she holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from Southern Methodist University. And she's also a native of the great state of Kansas. So welcome to the Battle Rhythm today, Meghan. We are thrilled to have you. And I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, we can. It's perfect.
All right, wonderful. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started. Thank you, Jeanette, for that introduction. As she mentioned, my name is Meghan Jackson. I am a member of our government affairs team here at Wounded Warrior Project. And to get us started, get my slides going. Many of you may not have even been aware that Wounded Warrior Project has a government affairs team, but we are a small but mighty team located up here in Washington, D.C., and our charter is to be the voice of wounded warriors here on Capitol Hill. So my portfolio, as Jeanette mentioned, covers a number of issues like healthcare, community care, anything related to the Department of Defense. But my main focus is what we're here today to talk a little bit about, and that is women veterans. So I'm really excited and honored to have this opportunity to talk a little bit more about our work at Wounded Warrior Project, as well as learn from you all a little bit later on about your advocacy and your efforts related to women veterans. So in 2020, we conducted about a year's worth of research into the women warriors that we serve at Wounded Warrior Project. And the goal of that was really to inform our advocacy. So today I'm going to walk you through some of those key findings, some of the key recommendations that we made as a result of that research, and talk a little bit about how they will contribute to our programming as well as our advocacy. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to start off with a little background on the Women Warriors Initiative, a little discussion around the why here. So, this was a joint effort between our Government Affairs Department, led by myself, and our research team to really dig deeper into the challenges and the experiences of the women warriors that we serve. And there were a couple good reasons why we made this investment, but I think they're best crystallized really by 2 data points. The first is that we know women veterans are the fastest growing part of the veteran community. They are the fastest growing population of service members, and they're also the fastest growing population of our own alumni that we serve at Wounded Warrior Project. So understanding all of that, we knew that the VA, the DoD, and our own organization needs to be better prepared to adapt to meet the needs of the changing face of our veteran population, which includes so many women. The second great reason you'll see represented on your screen here is that year after year, we were seeing pretty significant differences, not only in data, but in anecdotal stories from the programs and our subject matter experts who are delivering mental health care, physical, financial wellness. And as you can see on your screen here, we're seeing double-digit disparities in access to care for men and women, as well as lower rates of resiliency among women. So with this in mind, we knew we needed to better understand the reasons for this and better wrap our heads around, okay, what can we do internally to adapt our programming as needed to better meet the needs of this population? Or how can this inform our advocacy so that we're better able to represent the voices of those who are experiencing the greatest disparities in the VA healthcare system? To talk a little bit about our methodology, we sent out a survey to all the women veterans who were registered with us in January 2020. As you can see, we got about 5,000 responses. That's about 25%. We feel that that's pretty great. And this identified some of the key trends, the common themes, the real major issues among the larger population. And then we held these 13 roundtable discussions with nearly 100 women warriors to really dig deeper and understand the nuances of some of these challenges, as well as get their ideas and get their recommendations for what do they want to see changed in their government and how they want us to better advocate for them. So let's start off by getting into a few of the findings. I won't spend too much time talking about demographics today, but there are a couple points on this screen that I like to highlight because I think they really do a good job of telling the story about the population that we're working with. So the first is this employment table in the upper right of your screen, and you'll see that nearly 60% of women warriors who responded to our survey have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's pretty impressive. But 12% of them are unemployed and actively looking for work. So both of these numbers are pretty significantly higher than what we see in the male population. And that obviously begs the question, what is the reason for this gap? I'd also like to point out that this survey was pre-COVID, so it's safe to assume that some of these unemployment numbers are actually even a little bit higher now. So I'll get into a couple of the reasons behind that and a couple of our thoughts and proposed solutions in a little bit. The second thing I'd like to point out that we learned from the demographics is that nearly half, 49%, are single mothers. So women are far less likely than men to be married. And I point this out for two reasons. The first is that marriage in and of itself is certainly not a direct causation of a factor like isolation or like fulfillment, but it's a potential indicator of those things, especially when we consider it, in this pandemic world that we're hopefully quickly moving out of. But especially now, we can see how that single motherhood can offer added stress or offer, fewer systems of support during stressful times. And then the second reason I point that out is because it's a potential indicator of a really important barrier to care, especially considering all of the time constraints and all the responsibilities that come along with raising a family. I'm sure, as a lot of you on the line today know, this leaves a lot of women to put their own care last. So that's just an important factor that we think about when we're talking about access to care or we're talking about mental health, is really understanding the whole experience of that veteran. You'll also see on your screen here that women veterans are far more racially diverse than men. And I point this out because, when we look at larger societal issues or larger, societal disparities that are related to race and ethnicity, these are also issues that are going to apply to that veteran population. And it's another thing to keep in mind as we talk about care and services specifically for veterans. With that, let's get into a little more talking about transition and financial wellness. And I present these two together because they really are so closely connected. To sum it all up, when we talk about transition, what we learned is that there's really no clear path to VA. So for those of you who served on the line with us today, you may remember how challenging that time was in your life. You're trying to find a new job. You're trying to find and finance a new home. You're adapting to all these new civilian norms that you never had to deal with before. And along the way, you're leading your family through this transition as well. Again, that harkens back to this conversation about the single mothers, leading their own families through this extremely taxing and time. And if you remember that Wounded Warrior Project serves a population of self-identified wounded, ill, and injured service members, so many of those who are registered with us, on top of all these stressors that we know all of service members are experiencing, those that we serve are also probably going through pretty taxing mental or physical issues alongside that, and trying to get connected to long-term care in a brand new environment. So we know that the Department of Defense does a good job of executing their transition assistance program called TAP. Again, many of you who have served have probably been through that program yourself. And what we learned is that while that's all great information, it's simply not sticking. It's drinking out of a fire hose for a lot of these veterans. And we found that women warriors in particular are getting their best and their most meaningful guidance from their peers or from others who have already transitioned out of service. So that's so important about peer connection, because not only does it provide an outlet for service women to talk about all these stressors that they're all going through together, but it helps connect women to a network of others who have resources at their disposal, who have advice to provide to them, who have connections to the organizations that you all are a part of that can provide such life-changing support services to veterans during such a stressful point in their career. Now, secondly, that peer support is maybe not something that you would intuitively connect to financial wellness or to employment, but in talking with women veterans, what I found is that that's a major source of confidence in the professional world. And there's so much value in having a strong network and having close connections with mentors. And the women warriors that I spoke to overwhelmingly agree that this is lacking currently, that there is a need for mentorship, a need for networking opportunities. And, not only does this help with those practical skills like resume building or interview preparation, but it really helps to have professional peers who understand these women's military experiences, who understand how to help them adapt their communication style or adapt, the way that they speak about their service in a civilian workplace. We've found that that's just hugely valuable for these women. Now, in the full Women Warriors Initiative report, I talk quite a bit more about the TAP program, about veterans preference, and some other ideas to better tailor, the financial health programs and transition support programs for women veterans specifically. But these are just a couple ideas that I wanted to highlight for you today, specifically in relation to that peer support concept. So moving right off trauma, the statistics surrounding this really never cease to shock me. We know nationally about 1 in 4 women screen positively for military sexual trauma or MST. The Warrior Project, the numbers are far higher with our alumni populations. About the women report experiencing MST. So given the high rate of prevalence, and we know it's also a high level of severity for many of these women, it's of course a strong initiative. And it colored pretty much every conversation that we had, whether it was about accessing or about transitioning and even wellness. That VA does provide very liberal care for survivors of sexual trauma, but there are a couple of challenges that we want to address. One of those being the fact that that many women veterans don't know that they're eligible for from the VA for their military sexual trauma. Overall, the name of the game is coordination of care. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of programs and services that VA offers, but they need to work better and along the same continuum. And that's starting from, the point of the incident way through their transition and into VA care. So that means putting together a more clear and consistent warm handoff process from DoD to VA so that survivors are able to walk right out of service and directly into care without having to navigate a very complex system by themselves. And it also means that once they get to VA, their providers are talking to one another. They're communicating so that these survivors are forced to tell their traumatizing story over and over again. So we know that MST impacts a veteran's healthcare outcomes. It impacts the way they prefer to receive their care, their ability to form social connections, to hold down, a job in some cases, not only also in the type of workplace that they want to pursue, but the disability benefits that they're able to access in relation to that. So currently, all of those functions, all of which are impacted by an experience of military sexual trauma, are working separately at VA. And it's our goal to break down those silos so that, again, these providers, clinical and non-clinical, are working along the same continuum of care. Now, in that same vein, we'll move on to talk a little bit about mental health. And let me quickly frame this conversation. First of all, I think it's important to look at this issue in relation to isolation, because especially now during the pandemic, this concept of isolation has really informed how we at Wounded Warrior Project deliver our programming, how VA has pivoted to deliver its care and services. And I think there are some really impactful lessons to be learned from this. And the second thing I like to frame is that you're going to see a lot of big numbers on this slide. 92% feeling anxious, 89% feeling isolated. These are enormous numbers, but I do, again, like to frame this and understand that we are serving a population of wounded, ill, and injured. So we can safely assume that these numbers are a bit higher than the general population. Now, that said, the experience that's been described over and over again is consistent across many of the women that we spoke to. And it's that, these women come out of service, they look around and they don't see themselves represented in the veteran community because they only make up about 10% of it. And then they struggle to connect in some cases with civilian women who don't understand their military service. They maybe don't respond to their direct style of communication. And what this leads to is a sense of isolation and a sense of loneliness, which can then in turn exacerbate some of these mental health conditions, or in some cases directly cause them, like severe anxiety or depression or PTSD, et cetera. So one thing I like to point out in this respect is that we do make a lot of recommendations to invest in virtual programs. At Wounded Warrior Project, we have seen huge increases in women engaging in our virtual programs. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but there's a lot of potential to learn lessons from all this virtual delivery, especially for women veterans. For example, we know when they're getting something virtually, they don't have to get childcare. For those who may live in rural areas or who need to get, gender-specific care, they don't have to drive on those barriers that we know are specifically prevalent for women warriors. And I think there's just a lot of potential for some of these lessons and apply them in the long term to, help women veterans at the national and the federal level. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit about care. I would say that this is definitely the bulk of our research. So, I really could spend all day talking about this, but I place it here as the last issue to discuss because it really is the culmination of everything that we've talked about. And here's the key point: VA needs to be more inclusive of women. So I've got more data and more information than I can really wrap my arms around. But for today, there's really two takeaways that I would want to leave you with. And the first is that VA needs to have the authority and the ability to deliver gender-specific care and gender-specific health needs. And, you can see on your screen here, 1 in 4, 25% of women warriors told us that the services they needed were not offered. That was something that was frankly surprising to me. And, if you think about the history of the VA, it's very well serving the purpose that it was designed for, which was to serve the needs of an almost entirely male military. And that's certainly understandable, but it's not the case anymore. And so we need to continue to push our lawmakers and to push the VA to adapt as needed to the concerns of a new population of women. So the second takeaway that I'll leave you with is that we need to make VA a more inclusive and attractive environment for women veterans. And I'll zoom in on a couple points here that you'll see on your screen. One of those examples is in women's health. When we look at women's health clinics, which are becoming more and more prevalent across the country, it's a great opportunity to, make more welcoming environments, to make more comfortable environments for women veterans. And we can look at ways to either standardize those clinics or expand them, where the investment supports it, so that more women have access to these and they can better expect certain consistency of care. Again, harkening back to what I mentioned earlier about telehealth, some of the concerns that all rural veterans face are similar to those for women. Again, it breaks down that barrier of childcare in many cases. It breaks down that drive time barrier. And it also is, frankly, just a more comfortable environment for a lot of women who are, then able to avoid going through male-dominated VA facilities, especially for those who are survivors of military sexual trauma and may be uncomfortable in that environment. You'll also see a couple recommendations there related to the environment of care at VHA facilities: maximum safety, convenience, ease of access for women. So things like, implementing separate entrances when that's possible, or to consistently reviewing the flow of traffic or the location of certain offices, especially those related to, military sexual trauma related care or for, gender specific care. These are pretty simple solutions and simple to move the needle in better understanding the needs of women and identifying new ways to better serve them. Again, moving forward, I've thrown a lot of information at you, and the question really is so what? And all the findings in the data that we've talked about today are culminated in a written report. Again, it's called the Women Warriors Initiative, and that details some very specific actions and recommendations that we believe our lawmakers can take to improve care and services for women veterans. And you can find that full report on woundedwarriorproject.org. But they all really serve these three legislative priorities that you see on their screen: expanding access to care for women veterans, improving mental health and peer support opportunities, especially for those who are going through the transition process, and finally ensuring comprehensive, compassionate care for survivors of military sexual trauma. And these are just a couple of the ways that we will be advocating for women warriors in this 117th Congress. And I won't, at this point in time, get into some of those specific legislative initiatives or policies tied to each of these, but maybe in our breakout room, we can discuss a little bit more about that. So I have been talking for a while now, so I will take a break and see if we've got any questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Megan, for a great presentation. I see we have a few questions. If you have a question, please type that into the chat box, and I'll be sure to give Megan a chance to address that. The first thing I want to point out is that Kate Watson has shared the University of Alabama's Women Who Served survey in the chat box. If you're interested in taking that, please look at in the chat box for that link and go to that. And there's some other information about that in the box for you. So please check that out and take that survey if it's something that you're interested in. Second, we have a question here. And it says, do we know how much freedom VHA facilities have in adapting to the needs of women veterans? And does the VA need Congress to tell it to serve women veterans, or can individual hospitals address that need on their own? So kind of a two-part question there.
Sure. Well, to answer the first about what level of freedom does VHA, I mean, the answer to really both of those parts of that question is it's a collaboration between the individual hospitals and medical facilities, as well as Congress. In some cases, yes, Congress is required to take legislative action to expand services. However, in many cases, that's actually not necessary, and it's an internal decision that VA can make and change to its specific policies. So, for example, individual VHA, the administration, is able to make changes to the medical benefits packages. I'll give you an example, being infertility care. We know that that's a major concern among women veterans. It is an expansion that VA is able to do itself, but in that particular case, we know that we need legislative intervention, and Congress has done a good job of looking at issues like that. Last Congress was thrilled to see the passage of the Deborah Sampson Act, which it was comprehensive language for legislation, for those of you who are not familiar, about 30 provisions, most of which I would say were related to medical care, but also some benefits issues wrapped up there as well. And that I see again as a collaborative effort, because Congress was able to pass this landmark legislation in a really bipartisan way. And now it's up to VA to make sure that it's implemented correctly. And, my role as an advocate and working with our congressional partners is to oversee that implementation and ensure that it's meeting the needs of women veterans and is being implemented as Congress intended.
Well, thank you. So this kind of expands a little bit on the other question, the question you were just answering. Do all VA hospitals have women's centers? And do we know if having a specific women's center in a VA facility, is that having an impact?
That's a great question. The answer is no. Not all VA medical centers have a women's health clinic. And, these women's health clinics appear in different ways. Some are standalone clinics. Some are integrated into the facility. For example, the one up here in the DC VA Medical Center is integrated into it, though it has a separate entrance and a kind of a different environmental feeling around it. So the answer is no. Not all VA medical facilities have a dedicated women's health clinic. What I learned in talking to a lot of women veterans is that it does make a difference for their experience and their comfort level. A lot of times these women's health clinics are also just better equipped, to serve the specific needs. They're better equipped with things like stirrups, for example, or, a variety of other medical supplies that can be helpful. So, for example, one of the recommendations that we make in our report is to expand these clinics, again, where necessary, and secondly, to standardize them, because you're getting a very different experience at each one of them. I'm sure many of you on the line have heard the common phrase that if you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. And that's certainly true of these women's health clinics as well. So, I think there's quite a bit of work to be done to standardize that experience and to make sure that as much as possible, women across the nation are able to get that same high quality of care.
Do you know if a VA hospital is led by someone who recognizes that they need to change some things in their local VA, can that director make those changes themselves? Are they allowed to do that based on the needs of their own population, or do they have to follow what they're all doing, or have a congressional permission to do that?
Well, so again, it just depends. So, when I talk about the environment of care, in reviewing, for example, where mental health offices are located, or having appropriate lighting, or security measures in place to make women feel more comfortable, that's something that is certainly up to that individual facility director. They're able to adapt the layout, if needed. However, when you're looking at the delivery of certain healthcare, that is something that's led at a national level, and they do have certain directives that they need to follow.
I have someone asking you if you can, Amy Stevens would like to know if you can provide a link to the report in the chat box, please.
Sure, absolutely. I will do that as soon as I stop sharing my screen. I'll make sure to drop that in.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have a question? You're getting a lot of folks that are thanking you for your presentation. Does anyone else have a specific question for Meghan? When do you see the programs getting implemented? The programs that you talk about, when do you see
Sure.
getting implemented?
Yeah, in relation to the Deborah-Sampson Act, I'm assuming that that's in relation to. There's different timelines on each of the provisions. Actually, many of them will be coming up very shortly here over the summer, because they were given about a 6-month implementation timeline. There's some others, though. For example, one that we strongly advocated for was a VA childcare program, and that has an implementation timeline of about 5 years, because it's a much larger initiative. But for some of these kind of quicker turnaround times, so things like reports, or just data collection efforts, we should see some of those coming around end of May, early June.
Is there any pushback from anyone for the focus on women veterans issues? Anyone pushing back on that?
You know what? This has been a very impressively bipartisan push. The Congress last year created the Women Veterans Task Force that's run out of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and they've done a good job of making sure that it's bipartisan in nature. The Deborah-Sampson Act, again, as I mentioned, passed, I think, near unanimously. So yeah, I think that across the community, across the VA, we're seeing an increasing amount of focus on this, and I'm certainly optimistic about a lot of the changes that we'll be seeing. And again, I encourage all those on the line with us to continue to educate your lawmakers and your other individuals in the communities that you serve about the needs of women veterans, because again, as I think you all know, and really the mission of this organization is that we're stronger together. And this is certainly an area that the needle gets moved when we all collaborate and work together. So
I think we may have time for one or two more questions. Here's the next one for you. Your efforts are on the federal level. Are there any states you see leading the way on women veteran issues? That's a great question, really interesting.
That is a great question. And you're right that our are at this point in time focused on the federal level. That's to ensure that our the resources that we have at Wounded Warrior Project are dedicated to the greatest impact. In terms of individual states, that's an interesting question. I won't name any specifics. I would say one thing I'll point out, that which was kind of nice news to get at the end of last year, is that in New York was the first state to name a VA medical system after a woman veteran. So we are seeing efforts like that in California as well to rename some of these facilities after women veterans. And that one in New York is currently the only VA medical facility that is named for a woman veteran. So that's one that comes to mind. But frankly, I'd be really excited to learn more from you all with boots on the ground about how your localities are addressing this issue. And again, that was the kind of the point of meeting with so many women veterans, is to understand what's working for you locally and how can we amplify that at the federal level. So to answer your question, let's continue that conversation. And I'd love to really learn from you.
Yeah. Well, it looks like some folks in Virginia are already doing that. Somebody made us aware of the 2020 Virginia Women's Veterans Virtual Summit, June 23rd and 24th. So if you're interested in that, be sure to look at that link in the chat box. That sounds like that's going to be interesting. Another person is commenting and saying there are collaborative programming efforts going on between Virginia and New York, and their WC Women Veteran Center is superb. Someone else is sharing something that Michigan is doing in the chat box.
I'll certainly be reviewing those and following up. That's great to hear.
It's really good. Okay, one more comment. I'm going to read this one. And we got a lot. Michigan's doing, somebody's sharing the She is a Veteran campaign in Michigan, and there's a link to that. We have another comment that I think one of the biggest things states can do is to include women veterans at the table when discussing veteran issues. Oh, yes, I totally agree with that. Yep. Pennsylvania, in my opinion, is a very good old boy network kind of state. And Georgia Military Women is actively engaged at the State House in Georgia and is on the VSO board.
Wonderful.
Okay, what else we have here? We had something else I wanted to be sure to point out before we wrapped up. Oh yeah, and someone else is asking you for information about the Deborah Simpson Act. Where to find that?
Sure, you can just Google it. It's called the Deborah Sampson Act. That passed last year at the tail end of 2020 as part of a larger omnibus bill. But I'm also happy to follow up with some information individually, but it was a very, very landmark and very exciting piece of legislation. So if you give that a Google, you should be willing or be able to find plenty of information about it.
All right. Well, before we run out of time, I want to be sure to get some of these other comments. Someone says, stop grouping women veterans with spouses. Yes, not all women veterans have spouses. So yes. The women veteran coordinators around the country have been helpful in getting the women veteran survey out. Please get back to me if you want to learn more. We're working with many of them. Michigan Governor Whitmer declares June 12th Women Veterans Recognition Day. Right. Go Governor Whitmer. And here's a link for that. Let's see, do we have anything else? Wow, this is obviously an important topic. And I'm glad to see that so many people, and there's so many things going on, bringing awareness to women veterans. And the fact that women are veterans, I think that's something that we sometimes forget, that there's not as much emphasis on that women have served and are veterans.
Absolutely.
It's time for us to get into our breakout rooms. Allison, are you here?
So thanks, Jeanette. For the next 25 minutes, we're going to be going into breakout groups. In a few minutes, I'm going to open the breakout rooms for collaboration activity. Topics are empowering women warrior leadership. Topic 2 is outreach to women warrior. Topic 3, advocating for women warriors. And topic 4, supporting women warriors. Then we're going to come back to 25 minutes to wrap up and hear a key takeaway from each group. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up all the rooms. Welcome back, everybody. So the first topic group was the Empowering Women Warrior Leadership. Amy, can you kind of share with us a little bit of about what your group talked about and key takeaway? Go ahead and turn your video camera on too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm back. Appreciate this opportunity. We had a small but powerful group. Not too many people came to the group, but that's okay. I think the key takeaway was the redefining what success looks like for a woman veteran and how we transition is that it's not the same as what males may have. But when a male comes out, they're immediately focused on maybe getting education, but also getting that higher level career. Whereas women oftentimes do have other priorities, children and families especially. And so that when we look at that, is it successful or not successful, it takes you a little bit longer to get to where you want to go. And whatever that you succeed as, it might not be success for someone else, but it's based on your quality of life and what you think is important to you. And that's really okay, is that you can be successful and be a leader, but you can choose your own values and just stick to those.
Excellent. Sounds like you had a really good group. I am trying to get Kate Watson's video working. For some reason, it is not wanting to show her video. I'm sorry, Kate.
It's okay.
I don't know what is going
I'm the
on.
ghost. It's okay. We're a virtual thing and we're here to connect everybody. So I guess my ghost ethic kind of works.
Well, I am glad you're here and thank you for hanging in there with our technical difficulty. So
Sorry.
tell us what one outreach to warrior women. What are some key takeaways that your group talked about? Kate?
Oh, outreach? I did supporting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. We'll go ahead and start on yours. That was group number 4. Sorry.
Okay.
I think it was because I was working on your video and it got me messed up.
It's okay.
Okay. So yes, you'll just your group was a group 4 supporting women warriors. Yes, go ahead.
Right.
Sorry.
I did too much of the talking, not surprising. But the bottom line is we got some great information on individual initiatives, specifically addressing women's needs for financial guidance. And I'll just jump on that and say that is typically in the top 3 needs of all women veterans.
Wow.
Their financial fragility is huge. We also heard about the Warrior Alliance's fireside chats, and I encourage them, and I encourage all of you, if you're doing something that is a public event for women, right now I'm in a one-arm paper hanger, but that's going to change. And we want to know what you're doing, because there's, in the virtual world, just because you're doing it in Georgia doesn't mean it doesn't have value in Virginia or Oregon or Idaho. Also talked about, I spoke specifically and was confirmed, the value of your women veteran coordinators. If you don't know who they are, I can provide you with a list of that. Send me that. I've got it all. These are the most underappreciated women in your world, and where you can help them, please do so. And eventually we'll all work together to get them all knitted together. If I miss something else, the team can throw it in here.
Well, I had someone in your group taking notes, so we'll be sure to get all your information y'all talked about into the after actions. I appreciate your assistance with that. So this group 2, that they had outreach to women warriors, and they were unled, but had a good conversation going. So Brenda, would you be willing to share a little bit about what your group talked about?
We were talking about how people can connect with the VA Medical Center, women's whole health, the different classes to advocate for women-only creative arts and creative writing classes, to be a presence on social media, to conduct those women warrior fireside chats, as Kate mentioned. Just make sure that you're a presence out there. Learn who the veteran service officers are in your counties across the state, to connect with them. connect with your employment network. The disabled veteran outreach program specialists are a wealth of information in your area and can connect folks with all kinds of supportive services. So I think pretty much that's what I was saying is, just try to go up to a woman in the VA that you see and say, "Are you a woman veteran?" It's not a question that you normally will get. So it's kind of nice to hear.
Ashley Taylor, that was going to be in your group and somehow ended up in the wrong group. But Ashley, could you, I mean, it's a very, very brief because we don't have a lot of time. Can you give us a super brief talk about how y'all started the Fireside Chat in Atlanta?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So as navigators, we actually, of course, get our veterans that come in for specific needs. And during our conversation with our veteran clients, we've noticed that there was a need for a non-mental health talk space for our veteran clients, something to be able to actually complement mental health, but that was not actually specifically mental health. So last year, we actually started off with our male veteran fireside chat that actually went off went off extremely well. Initially, it was in person, but due to the pandemic, we actually had to transition that into being a Zoom-oriented event. And this year, we actually started our female veteran fireside chat, which has been absolutely amazing. And as I was actually mentioning to the ladies in my group, one of the key things that we've actually come across is the isolation that actually comes within the veteran community, because automatically when anybody brings up the word veteran, they don't think of women. They automatically actually feel like, oh, you must be a dependent of a veteran or a spouse of a veteran, and they don't honor and value female veteran service. And there's a lack of camaraderie, unfortunately, for our female veterans, where they don't actually have those battle buddies that they can actually call up and actually be able to talk to or meet up with a couple of times a year like the guys do. So we want to make sure that we actually had a safe place where our ladies could actually be able to talk and be able to connect. We actually have veterans of all eras, different branches, races, ethnicities. And it has been a beautiful thing to see these ladies come together and support each other and be able to build that connection and actually be able to have battle buddies, and it might not be someone that they served with, but they're actually going through their emotional battles together during our fireside chat. And we actually have it bi-weekly for 3 months. And just being able to see the level of growth and just being able to see these ladies come out of their shells. And when there's something going on with them personally, we actually have a text group that they can actually reach out to each other if there's something going on outside our fireside chat. It's just been a beautiful thing seeing them be able to identify with each other and also be able to grow with each other and also actually have those lasting friendships that they can actually talk to people about things that are relevant to them. So we're honored to be a part of that process.
Well, Ashley, I tell you what, why don't you put your information, your email address in the chat box, and if people have more questions about how you guys got that started, maybe they can get in touch with you and can connect you with those. Well, last group, we're kind of over time. Advocating for Women Warrior, Meghan.
We'll be super quick. I know we're running out of time here, but we had a great conversation about a number of issues. And frankly, I selfishly use this as an opportunity to pick the brains of others on, really critical issues in legislation about, problems like homelessness and behavioral health and healthcare. So I appreciate the input that everyone was able to provide. But, the real kind of crux of this conversation really comes back to stigma, and as it relates to recognition and support for women veterans in general, as well as stigma surrounding things like substance use disorder and mental health. So, the question that I keep asking myself is how do we legislate culture change? And while we did not solve all the world's problems in the last 20 minutes, it was a good start. So I am grateful for the good conversation.
Well, we're grateful for you and for being here today. I hope everybody got a little bit of information. Jeanette, why don't you wrap us up really quickly and we'll say our goodbyes.
All right. Well, thank you all for collaborating and sharing. Here at America's Warrior Partnership, we empower communities to empower veterans. And we hope today we provided you with some insights, best practices, new partners, and some tools where you can do just that in your own community. We hope to see you next month on our Battle Rhythm. It will be on June 7th, and it will be empowering veteran entrepreneurs and small business owners. That'll be June 7th at 2 p.m. We hope you join us then. Thank you to Meghan Jackson. You started a wonderful conversation today, and we appreciate you and all the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.